I'm Jacob Jones, and I've been teaching here for 5 years, and before that I was in Italy for 5 years teaching at the University of Maryland all over Italy, and my educational academic background's in history, American history, so that's what I was teaching. And then when this job came open, when Jill Schneller went on her parental leave, then this opportunity opened up, and decided to come to Germany, where my wife lives, and she's from this area, so that's why I came in the first place. Having lived now in Italy and Germany, I've, like anyone else operating in a second language, I've had to negotiate the boundaries with tax forms and housing forms and renting an apartment and all the things that come with the territory. So in that sense, I've had to improve my own language skills, and they're still not very good, but in other languages, but they're better than they were. And to be honest with you, teaching English has probably and most definitely improved my own English language skills, because I've had to pay attention to things that I didn't pay attention to for years because it was nature to me, and you don't examine it. But cultural competencies, well, it probably would be somewhat along the same lines. I had friends who had lived or studied in Europe, or done research in Europe, had met numerous Europeans in the United States. So it wasn't like I was in a different universe, but it's very different, the same going the other way. It's somebody who studies it or even has substantial knowledge about the other culture if you're in it. And mostly in a good way. I mean, you learn facets that you, of course, would never even occur to you if you hadn't been in the place. And so there's really, if you have your eyes open, you're thinking there's really no way to avoid not having more cultural competence if you're overseas, and that being kind of the point. So I feel, yeah, a lot more grounded, as knowledgeable as a European, I suppose, now than I did before. And have learned that even though on the surface, these being all reasonably prosperous Western economies, Germany, Italy, United States, France, whatever, are on the whole not unlike each other, more alike than unlike each other, there is a broad range of areas where they're not. And I've learned where some of those borders are, and I find them interesting. And lastly is the career-wise. That's a little different. I trained my PhDs in history, American history, which I got in 2004, and taught history, mostly American history, while I was in Italy, but not in Germany. Germany, this is something of a new field for me. I did teach composition, I did teach government in my last gig, but not some of the courses I'm teaching now, so I've had to expand my own range of abilities, or tried, because teaching American history is, well, it's a little different in Germany than it is. Well, there aren't that many chairs, there aren't that many full professor chairs in North American or American history in Germany or in Europe, and except maybe Britain, and the academia is organized slightly differently. There are different layers in the system, and so there aren't as many opportunities to teach history. But you know, you make your adjustments. So so career-wise, it's opened new doors and closed others. Let's put it that way. I mean, being here in Central Europe, of course, has afforded me the opportunity, and also living in Italy, of going multiple places that I probably hadn't even imagined I would go to. And as I often hear, I won't say from where, but Hanover is 2 hours from pretty much any place in Europe. And so I've been able to take advantage of that and travel like anyone else would, who can afford it and has the time, from Istanbul to Land's End. However, most of Scandinavia, I still like to travel to, haven't been to yet. A substantial part of Eastern Europe, so Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, only touched on Slovakia. So those, in Europe, those places I would like to get to. I haven't even been to Scotland yet, so there's one. I know it's unusual, but in terms of living, Italy still has a pretty substantial pull on my psyche, if you will. I do think, however, you need to spend long enough to almost be forced not to be a tourist anymore. So if you have to rent an apartment, if you have to find a place to stay, if you make a new group of friends or colleagues, in some ways, if you get to the point in being there, which varies for everyone, where you wake up one day or you're walking down the street one day and you're going, wait a minute, this isn't really unusual to me anymore, and you've kind of made a new home. And it takes, I think, at least to let the initial cultural transition wear off a couple of months minimum, and then even if you dive in, it's going to take that long, because every other day you're going to come up with something, oh, what's that, which is great. So I don't know, 6 months. I do think it would be best. I understand it's often a matter of finances for the student, understandably, and but of course this university and most European universities now are trying to push international cooperation and exposure, and I really think more than 3 months is necessary to do that. Again, and attached to what I was saying before, I think 6 months is probably something of a minimum. So, and there are many ways to go about doing it. One of them is to have more exchange programs like we have in Nebraska and other schools. But also perhaps internships, where that can be organized through this university cooperatively someplace overseas, and vice versa. So if you have people who on their end in media or in other things want to learn and have an international aspect to their own CV and develop their own skills, to have an exchange program on that basis. So, and I know we already do that with ICEP and some other programs, but I think it needs to be expanded. Not always, but often. The first reason would be accent, strangely enough, which is still surprising to me. I don't know whether it's an artifact of German students abroad or European students in general, but I have had many students over the last 5 years here who have been in New Zealand or Australia or South Africa or the United States or Britain that have accents from those places. And if I ask them how long they've been there, they'll say, oh, I was there for 6 weeks, or I was there for 2 months. And they're speaking in a New Zealand accent, English. And you know when they left to go to that place, they weren't speaking in that accent. So to me, it kind of suggests how open students are to the experience when they get there, and how it's kind of, I don't mean not entirely soft clay, but it is, you know, that imprint. Because I know for myself, I don't know if it's age or what, that whenever I speak German, instantly people say, oh, usually they'll say American, but sometimes they'll say British, but it's one or the other. And I know I'm always going to be that way. But I've got students that when they speak English, sound like a Aussie. And that is, you know, I'll never get there. And so I think that's, in the first place, it's cool. And in the second place, some sort of alchemy is going on there. Obviously, the other thing is their cultural experience and knowledge themselves. I mean, if they've been to a high school in the States, they understand the differences between the systems, and they personally experience things that they might see on TV programs like cheerleading, which has now become popular in Germany, but, you know, American football, these kinds of cultural, doing theater in high school in the US, or that they wouldn't have quite the same experience with here in Germany. So those things come forward too. And so yeah, there are usually some indicators, and then occasionally euphemisms and slang expressions that probably wouldn't come unless they've been to an overseas, an Anglophone country.